You know that moment when you're absolutely certain you've found your soulmate. When every fiber of your being recognizes that connection that transcends everything you've ever experienced in life, and then they pull away right when you were closest to coming together for good. This isn't an ordinary separation. It's like the entire universe conspired to show you paradise, and then slammed the door in your face. But Carl Jung discovered this isn't coincidence or cruelty of fate. It's the karmic cycle of love. An inevitable pattern where the most devastating collapse always precedes the union of truly compatible souls. And the truth is, the more intense the separation you're experiencing right now, the more powerful the final union that's being prepared will be. That's why you need to watch until the end, because I'm going to reveal the secret to decoding the karmic cycle of love. And if you stay until the end, you'll discover the most precise sign that this collapse is about to transform into the most extraordinary union two souls can experience on this physical plane. Carl Jung realized that when two truly compatible souls meet, when there's a real recognition of essence beyond all social masks and constructed personalities, they can't simply unite at the surface level where they're operating when they first meet. They're forced by energetic laws that transcend conscious will to descend together into what Jung called the alchemical nigredo, the complete decomposition of everything that isn't authentic between them, before they can be reborn in a frequency that makes possible a conscious and lasting union. But here's the problem. Most people, when they find their compatible soul and begin to experience this process of mutual deconstruction, interpret all the pain and chaos as evidence that the connection isn't healthy, that they made a mistake, that they should seek more comfortable and peaceful relationships. They run away exactly when they're about to access levels of intimacy and union they didn't even know were possible. Jung said the tragedy of humanity isn't failing to find true love, but finding it and not having the courage to pay the price of transformation it demands. And the price is always the same. The voluntary death of all versions of yourself that aren't compatible with who you need to become to sustain a conscious union with another individuated soul. And here's where most people get completely lost in the twin flame concept. They think finding the compatible soul should be like finding the missing puzzle piece, something that fits perfectly and solves all their emotional problems. But Jung discovered it's exactly the opposite. Finding your true compatible soul is like finding the chemical catalyst that will dramatically accelerate all the transformation processes you've been postponing for years or decades. It's as if the universe is saying, now that you've found each other, there's no way to avoid becoming who you really are, and this process is going to be intense and painful because you've built entire identities based on who you thought you needed to be accepted by the world. The first sign that you've found a truly compatible soul is that their presence in your life makes it impossible to continue pretending to be someone you're not. You can try to maintain your social masks, your conditioned behaviors, your emotional survival strategies, but they unconsciously see through all of that, and their own authenticity forces you to confront the inauthenticity in yourself. Jung called this projection of the anima and animus, when we see in the other aspects of our own soul that we haven't fully integrated yet. But in the case of truly compatible souls, this projection happens reciprocally and simultaneously, creating a dynamic where you become perfect mirrors of each other's deepest issues. They can awaken in you a rage you didn't know existed, not because they're being cruel, but because something in their authenticity touches a wound you've been avoiding feeling for years. You can trigger in them fears and insecurities they thought they'd overcome, not because you're being manipulative, but because your own vulnerability forces them to recognize vulnerabilities in themselves they hadn't fully integrated yet. During this initial phase of recognition and mutual deconstruction, you can experience moments of connection so deep they seem to transcend the limitations of time and space, followed by periods of conflict so intense you question whether you should really be together. Jung understood these extremes aren't signs of incompatibility, but evidence that you're accessing layers of the psyche that are rarely touched in surface relationships. When two people connect only in personality, at the surface of their social masks, they can have harmonious but limited coexistence. When two souls recognize each other beyond the masks, they're automatically pulled into a dynamics that will force them to integrate shadow aspects of themselves. They preferred to keep hidden, and this process is naturally turbulent and challenging. The second sign that you're compatible souls going through the karmic cycle is that the conflicts between you aren't about superficial issues like money, future plans, or differences of opinion. They're about deep existential questions. How each of you handles vulnerability, how you react when you feel threatened,
what strategies you use to avoid intimacy when it becomes too intense, how you sabotage your own happiness when things are going too well.
Jung observed that compatible souls become living laboratories for each other, where all unresolved issues, all unprocessed traumas, all aspects of personality that need refining come to the surface in an accelerated and intensified way. You might discover you have behavior patterns you didn't know about, that you react in ways that surprise you, that you're capable of feeling anger or fear or neediness, with an intensity you've never experienced with anyone else before. This happens because Jung realized that compatible souls operate on an energetic frequency that completely bypasses the normal psychological defenses we use in casual relationships. With other people, you can maintain some level of control over how much of yourself you reveal, can consciously choose which aspects of your personality to show and which to hide. But with a compatible soul, there's an energetic transparency that makes it impossible to maintain these defenses consistently. It's as if they have direct access to the deepest layers of your psyche. And this can be simultaneously liberating and terrifying. Liberating because you can finally be completely authentic with someone. Terrifying because there's nowhere to hide from aspects of yourself you haven't learned to accept and love yet. During this deconstruction period, which Jung identified as absolutely necessary for any genuine union of souls, you can go through phases where everything seems to be falling apart. The romantic fantasies about what it would be like to be together prove naive in the face of the complex reality of two real people with real issues trying to build something authentic together. The projections you are making onto each other begin to dissolve, and you're faced with imperfect human beings, with shadows, with limitations, with wounds that perhaps no relationship can completely heal. And this is where most people give up, because they mistake the end of romantic illusions for the end of true love, when it's actually exactly the opposite. Jung said real love can only begin when fantasy love ends, when you stop loving a projection and start loving a real person, with all their complexities and contradictions. But here's the most surprising thing Jung discovered about this process. When two souls are truly compatible, when there's authentic recognition beyond all projections and fantasies, they can't permanently separate even when the intensity of the deconstruction process becomes almost unbearable. There's a magnetic force that keeps them connected beyond conscious will, a recognition that transcends all surface difficulties and continues operating even when they think they've completely lost the connection. Jung observed that truly compatible couples can go through temporary separations during this process of mutual transformation, can even get involved with other people in an attempt to find something easier, but they invariably discover that no other connection offers the depth, authenticity, and growth opportunity they find in each other. The third sign that you're going through the karmic cycle of compatible souls is that even when you're separated, even when you've decided the relationship is too complicated to work, you continue growing and transforming in ways that were clearly inspired by the time you spent together. Jung called this individuation through encounter, when the simple fact of having deeply known another soul dramatically accelerates your own process of self-knowledge and personal development. You might notice you're more courageous about being authentic in all areas of life, that you've developed greater tolerance for ambiguity and emotional complexity, that you can love in more mature and less possessive ways. They might be going through similar transformations, becoming more integrated, more aware of their patterns, more capable of genuine intimacy. Jung understood that when two souls are truly compatible, they continue influencing each other's development even from a distance, even when they're not in direct contact, even when they consciously believe the connection has ended. There's an energetic resonance that persists beyond external circumstances, and this resonance continues promoting growth and transformation in both until they reach a level of maturity where they can relate in a completely new way, on a higher and more conscious frequency. It's as if there's a cosmic timer operating, ensuring you don't reunite before both have done the inner work necessary to sustain the type of union your souls recognized as possible when they first met. Jung observed this not just in his theoretical studies, but in his own life. When he met Emma, who would become his wife and soul partner for decades, they went through a period of mutual destruction so intense they almost separated permanently. She questioned everything about him, demolished his psychological defenses, forced him to confront aspects of his own shadow he preferred to keep hidden. He, unconsciously, did the same with her, creating situations that pushed her beyond all her limits of patience and understanding. And it was only when both stopped resisting this process of mutual demolition when they accepted they needed to psychologically die to who they were when they met. That they discovered the possibility of a form of love that completely transcends the limitations of conventional relationships. Jung understood this pattern wasn't pathological or accidental. It was an energetic necessity. Two souls that recognize each other at deep levels can't peacefully coexist on the surface, because each is a perfect mirror of what the other needs to transform to become entirely themselves. During this period of apparent separation, which Jung identified as the most crucial phase of the karmic cycle, each of you is guided by synchronicities and life experiences that force you to confront exactly those issues your relationship had revealed, but that you perhaps weren't ready to resolve while you were together. You might find yourself facing situations that challenge you to develop exactly those qualities she said you needed to develop. She might be led to work on exactly those personality aspects you had identified as limiting for her. It's as if the universe continues the transformation work you began together, but now individually, preparing both of you for an eventual reunion on a completely different frequency. The fourth sign that you're going through the karmic cycle is that during this period of individual transformation, you begin to understand and appreciate aspects of each other that previously irritated or confused you. Jung observed that when compatible souls temporarily separate to do their individual inner work, they develop a deeper and more compassionate understanding of each other, because they begin to recognize in themselves the same issues and limitations they saw in the other. You might realize that characteristic in her that bothered you was actually a reflection of something in yourself you hadn't recognized. She might begin to value qualities in you she previously considered problematic, because she developed those same qualities in herself through the experiences she had after you separated. Jung discovered this process of gaining perspective and compassion through personal experience is absolutely essential for compatible souls to be able to reunite sustainably. When you're in the middle of the emotional intensity of confronting your deepest issues through the dynamics with another person, it's difficult to maintain the objectivity and compassion necessary to grow constructively. But when you live similar experiences individually, when you're forced by life circumstances to develop qualities you previously only criticized in the other, you gain a visceral understanding of how hard it is to change deeply rooted patterns, how we all have shadow aspects we prefer to avoid, how real growth takes time, patience, and a lot of self-compassion. During this phase of individual transformation, you might notice your connection with them becomes less possessive and more loving, less based on need and more based on genuine recognition. Jung said possessive love is always a form of ego trying to control another ego to satisfy its own emotional deficiencies. But love between individuated souls transcends need and becomes a form of mutual recognition, where each loves in the other not what they can receive, but what they recognize as sacred and unique in that specific soul. You might discover you think of them with more tenderness and less anxiety, that you sincerely wish for their happiness even if it doesn't include you, that your own happiness no longer depends on being with them, but the possibility of sharing life with them has become even more precious exactly because it's no longer a desperate need. The fifth sign that you're approaching the end of the karmic cycle is that you begin having recurring dreams about each other, synchronicities that seem to connect you beyond time and space, and a growing sense that something is about to change in the dynamics between you. Jung studied extensively communication through the collective unconscious, and realized that truly compatible souls maintain a psychic connection that transcends physical distance and conscious communication. During the period of individual transformation, this unconscious connection continues operating, and as both approach the level of maturity needed for conscious reunion, this psychic communication intensifies perceptibly. You might begin dreaming of them with increasing frequency, and the dreams can have a different quality from normal dreams. More vivid, more loaded with meaning, leaving a lasting impression even after you wake up. Jung understood these dreams aren't just projections of conscious desire, but genuine forms of communication between two souls that remain connected at the deepest levels of the psyche. They can serve as preparation for physical reunion, helping both process and integrate the transformations they've experienced individually and energetically prepare to meet on a completely new frequency. Synchronicities also intensify during this final phase of the karmic cycle. Jung defined synchronicity as meaningful coincidences that suggest a deeper connection between apparently separate events, and in the context of compatible souls, these synchronicities can become so frequent and specific it's impossible to ignore them. You might find references to them in unexpected places, might receive messages that seem to come directly from them through other people or situations, might encounter symbols, numbers, or words that are clearly connected to your relationship. Jung saw these synchronicities not as coincidences, but as evidence that you're being guided by forces operating beyond individual consciousness, preparing the ground for a reunion that will happen at the right time. But here's the most important aspect Jung discovered about the end of the karmic cycle. The reunion of compatible souls never happens through conscious effort or manipulation. It happens naturally and organically when both reach the necessary level of maturity, and usually happens in a way neither could have planned or predicted. Jung observed that trying to force or accelerate this process always results in more separation, because it indicates at least one of the souls hasn't completely done the inner work necessary to sustain a conscious union. The real reunion happens when you become energetic magnets for each other again, but on a much higher frequency than when you first met. When this reunion finally happens, Jung said it's immediately recognizable as qualitatively different from all previous encounters between you. There's no longer the desperate need, the possessiveness, the emotional games, the unresolved projections that characterized earlier phases of the connection. Instead, there's a sense of deep recognition, a peace that transcends initial romantic enthusiasm, a quiet certainty that you've arrived at a place where you can finally build something lasting together. Jung called this the hieros gamos, the sacred marriage that happens when two individuated souls unite consciously, maintaining their individuality, while creating something greater than the sum of their parts. The sixth sign that you've completed the karmic cycle and are ready for conscious union is that you can openly discuss all the issues that previously caused explosive conflicts between you, and you can do this with compassion, humor, and a broader perspective on the complexities of human nature. Jung observed that couples who have gone through the complete process of mutual transformation develop a common emotional language, an intuitive understanding of each other's patterns and triggers, and an ability to navigate conflicts constructively rather than destructively. You can laugh about aspects of yourselves that previously made you suffer, can talk about past wounds without reopening those wounds, can recognize and accept each other's limitations without trying to change them through criticism or manipulation. During this final integration period, you might also discover you've developed interest and passion for creative projects or service you can accomplish together, something that goes beyond the personal relationship dynamics and connects you to a greater purpose. Jung believed truly compatible souls are brought together not just for their own evolution, but to contribute uniquely to the collective evolution of humanity. This can be through creative work, healing projects, social activism, creating family, or any other form of expression that combines both of your unique talents in a manifestation that serves something greater than you individually. But perhaps the most definitive sign that you've completed the karmic cycle is a quality of peace and stability in the connection that doesn't depend on external circumstances. Jung said relationships based on emotional need are always vulnerable to external changes, but relationships based on soul recognition create their own internal stability. You can go through external challenges, can face practical difficulties, can have occasional disagreements, but there's an unshakable foundation in the relationship that isn't affected by these surface fluctuations. It's as if you've discovered a type of love that exists independently of circumstances, that strengthens through challenges instead of being threatened by them. Jung also observed that couples who complete the karmic cycle develop a form of communication that transcends words. You can sense each other's emotional states even from a distance, can communicate through looks, touches, and silences in ways that are incomprehensible to people who haven't experienced this level of psychic intimacy. This nonverbal communication isn't based on emotional dependency, but on genuine synchrony that developed through years of knowing each other in the deepest layers of the psyche. It's as if you've developed a private language that allows instant communication about complex issues without need for lengthy explanations. And here's Jung's final and most important discovery about the karmic cycle of love. When two souls finally unite after completing this entire transformation process, they don't just find personal happiness, but become catalysts for other souls going through the same process. Jung believed each couple that can consciously navigate the journey from deconstruction to union becomes a living example that it's possible to transcend the limitations of conventional relationships. They radiate a quality of love that awakens in other people the memory that this type of connection is possible, inspiring others not to give up during the most difficult phases of their own karmic cycles. If you've made it this far and recognized your own journey in this video, if you felt I was describing exactly what you've lived or are living with someone you recognize as a compatible soul, know this isn't coincidence. Jung would say you were guided to this information at the exact moment your soul was ready to understand that the collapse you've experienced or are experiencing isn't evidence of failure, but the necessary preparation for a form of love that transcends everything you imagine possible. If you're currently in the phase of apparent separation, trust the process of individual transformation that's happening. If you're in the phase of mutual deconstruction, have the courage to continue doing the inner work instead of running to more superficial relationships. And if you sense you're approaching reunion, allow it to happen naturally, without trying to force or control the universe's timing. Now, if you want to stop just understanding theoretically what's happening and start living this transformation in practice, I've created 2 materials that will help you on this journey. The first is 21 Days of Transformation with Carl Jung, a practical guide based on the most powerful techniques Jung developed for individuation and self-knowledge. The second is the Survival Manual for Difficult Days, because I know when you're in the middle of karmic collapse, you need practical strategies to maintain faith in the process. The link is in the first pinned comment. And now I want to know who really stayed until the end of this video. Write in the comments, "I trust the karmic cycle," because that shows me you're not just another viewer, but someone who's truly committed to their evolution and willing to trust that the collapse isn't the end of your story, but the beginning of the most extraordinary union 2 souls can experience. Thanks for staying with me until here. See you in the next video.